Hello there! This is the second part of the history of Anti-Mage. Although you can watch this on its own, I recommend seeing the first video if you haven't yet. With that said, please allow me to properly introduce the topic. Ahem. Magic is an abomination, but it's no match for the history of Anti-Mage. Anti-Mage arrived onto the battlefield of Dota 2 as part of the starting lineup, debuting during the International 1 tournament in August of 2011. The hero doesn't actually have a name here, and simply goes by his title of Anti-Mage, so be sure to make note of that. His design in this day and age is modeled after a monk in religious-inspired clothing that also gets to show off his massive pythons. He keeps to a primarily purple color scheme, although his skin is orange for some reason, and he dons a rather incomprehensible mohawk. His current design doesn't veer too far off from his concept art, aside from the minor details on his clothing and his weapons. His weapons originally resembled double-bladed swords, but evolved into half-chakrams similar to Illidan's, and eventually these odd enlarged axes. His beta icons show some visual changes as well. His facial markings started out as a solid stripe, and it looks like they've upped his saturation overall. Also, he was like, really angry for a minute there. The beta skill icons are your typical goofy affair, and they more or less match his current design, except for Mana Void, which I would argue used to be way better before. I'm not sure what to make of it, but the fact that these were primarily green may signify that Anti-Mage may have had that as his primary color scheme at one point. However, no further evidence suggests that. Anti-Mage's written lore covers his time as a young monk, as well as the origin of his disdain for magic. The story goes over the background of the monks of Turstakuri, whose monastery was located high upon a mountain, where they avoided conflict and could focus on meditation. Unfortunately, the Legion of the Dead God had come through to spread the creed of their unliving lord, by way of resurrecting the dead and tearing down all who stand in their way. The monastery put up a defense, but could barely last 2 weeks against them, with some monks tragically believing that the murderous hordes were demonic visions sent to distract them from their meditation. The only survivor was a young acolyte who had not been admitted to the monastery. He watched his comrades die, but managed to escape with their scrolls, swearing to obliterate not only the dead god's magic users, but to end magic altogether. You can call this a grimdark retelling of Avatar: The Last Airbender all you want, but you gotta admit, this is easily the worst internship in the history of the world. In any case, his equipable items show that he's made good on his word, and he's slain a few notable mages in his time. The Gifts of Yaskreth set are a batch of rewards given to Anti-Mage to help him slay a mage named Sosk, who oppressed the Kingdom of Yaskreth. The sash item describes that Sosk had vile enchantments, and the bracers mention that the Kingdom of Yaskreth reached out to Anti-Mage after he grew in power and prestige. The Basher Blades were a pair of weapons that shattered the Anvil Magus, Hroth. Its terrible weight dented and shattered his iron shell, just as its blades tore into the enchanted hide beneath. Side note, I really wish there were more Magus characters in Dota. I just think they're neat. The spoils of the Shifting Sorcerer set tell of AM's battle with a sorcerer named Throsho. According to the crest item in the set, he often took a demon's form to intimidate those around him, and those frightened by him began to worship him over time. The bracer mentions that Throsho was eccentric, and the rap says that the shifted forms of the sorcerer were said to be so hideous as to shatter even the strongest mind upon sight, the implication being that Anti-Mage had to cover his eyes in order to take on the mage. This set was actually created in partnership with Burning, the Anti-Mage god himself. Must be why this has some resemblance to the original AM model. However, this set and its connection to Illidan would be horrifically one-upped by the Guilt of the Survivor set, which seems to be a much more anime-inspired version of the original Magebreaker. Its description states that as even faces of the favored kin fade from recollection, the unholy forms of the Turstakuri faithful rise perversely in the mind's eye. But hey, even if this set is a pretty big upgrade over the spoils from the Shifting Sorcerer, you can combine the wrap with the Shroud of the Awakened to fully protect yourself from any nasty global viruses out there. Just give us some hand sanitizer weapons and we're good to go. I'm sure you've noticed that there isn't much mention of Terrorblade here, and well, there isn't any. Anti-Mage does have some voice lines that refer to them as brothers, but ever since Terrorblade came into Dota 2, these responses remain unused, and their connection has never been brought up at all. It seems like there were plans in the beginning to keep their familial bonds intact, but just to reiterate, they are not officially recognized as brothers in Dota 2. It's a shame since their backstories were so intertwined with one another in the old days, but since these voice lines exist, let's not let them go to waste.
Hello, brother. The disgrace of magic stricken from our family. What would Mother say? Mother always liked you best.
Before we dive deeper into the lore of Dota 2, do not forget that you can pick up an officially licensed Anti-Mage Figma that you can pose and swap heads with to your heart's content. Now, I'm more of a collector, so I still have mine sealed, but who's to say you can't have fun with it anyways? I will enter combat, and at the beginning of the phase, Xenagos God of Rebels effect will trigger, and I will target my Ilharg the Razeboar, giving him +6/+6, and haste. You don't have any blockers, so I'm going to declare him as my only attacker, which causes his effect to trigger, and I will play a Chroma Angel of Fury from my hand tapped and attacking, doing 18 damage to you for game. Bah! This figure was released alongside a Wind Ranger one, as well as a comic called A Dark Purpose to serve as promotional material. This starts off with Anti-Mage hunting down a necromancer called Balamar Oakrot. After finding one of his minions in some sort of meat locker, the stooge sends out a resurrected monster after Anti-Mage and exclaims, "The dead god hungers," the one and only from Anti-Mage's lore. After dispatching the monster and minion, the perspective switches over to Wind Ranger, who seems to have already located the dead god, and this is the first glimpse we get of the vile fiend who once wiped out the monks of Turstakuri. She picks off a few of the lower level grunts before Anti-Mage meets up with her and an anime battle ensues. Everything goes incredibly well as Wind Ranger shoots 7 arrows into the necromancer, which seemingly finishes him off. Anti-Mage meanwhile scolds her since he wanted to keep the dead god alive. Luckily for him, the dead god certainly lives up to his name and is able to reanimate himself, leaving us with quite the cliffhanger. Artifact, as usual, extends the lore of the Dota universe and expands on Anti-Mage's role in the story by establishing the Tyler Estate. What is the Tyler Estate, you may ask? It's basically Wizard Jail. In short, it's a new faction where people who hate magic banded together. The estate itself is featured in its own card, setting the precedent that Weeping Rose governs itself for the most part, but those who do break its few rules are sent to the Tyler Estate. Tyler Estate Censor's description elaborates on this further, saying that people mistake Weeping Rose's open-mindedness as a license to be irresponsible, and the estate is what awaits those who would abuse the hospitality. Howling Mind also portrays the types of punishments they dish out in the estate, as every now and again, a wizard is allowed to leave the Tyler Estate, though when they do, they are irreparably changed. Pugna's hero card also references the prison directly.
The Tyler Estate! It seeks to control magic! Punish those that violate rules set by the Quorum! But I will show them that some things cannot be controlled, and when the Tyler Estate burns, I will set my sights on Weeping Rose itself.
On the other side of things, Silencer seems to be a warden there, and he has a very blunt way of keeping the law.
Many different types of wizards fall under my care in the Tyler Estate. I do not bother to learn their stories or their crimes. If the Quorum has sent them to me, they ought to be treated in the same manner, harshly.
So where exactly does Anti-Mage fall into all of this? Well, the card Collateral Damage shows that he's been recruited by Silencer himself.
Convincing the Anti-Mage to work with the Tyler Estate wasn't an easy task, but it was worth it. He is exuberant in his work.
Looks like part of the job requirements include beating the shmeat out of Rubik. And in one tiny reference to all of this is Lion's hero card where he mentions that he's a hunted man. The Court of Ristoul is hunting him for his hand, while Anti-Mage wants his head, showing us that he must have committed quite a bit of ruckus if he's got magic police and a squad of demons after him. Now it's likely that Anti-Mage will have a much larger role to play in the future of Artifact, because as of right now, he's a black hero card in Artifact 2.0. He's got that weak virgin posture, whereas the Chad Tusk looks down on him with pity. His signature spell here is Mana Void, which deals damage to a unit and its neighbors, equal to the mana missing from the enemy. A pretty faithful reference, only time will tell before we truly understand Anti-Mage's role in the world of Dota. And just to round out the games in the Dota universe, Underlords features Anti-Mage as a playable unit. He doesn't do anything out of the ordinary here, just has Mana Break as his ability really. I do want to highlight a couple of things regarding his voice responses though. So he's against the idea of magic as he's always been, but a lot of his lines bring up the Tyler Estate, which leads me to believe that this is the direction that Valve wants to take with the hero. Alongside that, the only character-specific voice lines he has are directed towards Lich, and this might be a sign that Lich has committed crimes severe enough to be imprisoned.
I've finally found you, Lich. I'll send you to the Tyler Estate. Come, Anti-Mage. It's time to die at my hand.
taking a quick side trip away from Anti-Mage, let's talk about his disciple, Wei. For the 2020 Battle Pass, a series of personas and arcanas were teased, including one for Anti-Mage called the Disciple's Path. After many weeks of anticipation, it was released on July 10th, 2020. From her little blurb of lore, we find out that she was trained in the lost ways of the Turstakuri by her adopted mentor, the Anti-Mage, and after years of practice, she has left the confines of her temple to see if she's truly ready to face the world of magic and bring the wizards of these realms to their vile knees. Her introduction also comes with a comic called The Hunt, and I just want to say that Dota 2 does their comics so well. Wish we had more. The story starts out at the Tyler Estate, go figure, where a sorcerer named Tarath and his cronies have managed to escape. Cut to the next page, and we've got Silencer and Anti-Mage, just hanging out like a pair of purple dads. We then move over to our new heroine Wei, and get a good sense of her personality right off the bat. She's spunky, she's bad at meditating, and she's a fan of reading, specifically the books of good kind, also known as Axe's Page. Anti-Mage and Wei have a discussion regarding the current situation with the Tyler Estate, and where that leaves the two moving forward. Anti-Mage will go off to hunt Tarath and Whitespire, but he sends out Wei to assassinate the remaining wizards in Weeping Rose. With her training finally done, Wei has set off on her quest with conviction to fulfill the wishes of the Anti-Mage. So voice responses are usually the way that you learn about a hero and the world of Dota 2, but at this point, Wei's got about 35 minutes worth of lines to sift through, and although she does add a lot of personality and flavor into the Dota 2 lore, I will simply highlight a few key points that I think are most important, but I do encourage you to look through them yourself to see if you can uncover any neat tidbits. Wei has a series of 5 monologues which are the biggest sources of information we can gather. The first one establishes her relationship with Anti-Mage, where it's mentioned that Wei considers him a father figure, and it looks like the guy's got good personal boundaries because he insists on being called her mentor rather than her master.
Vanessa once told me that the Anti-Mage is just using me, which isn't surprising. She's a wizard. Lying comes easy for their kind. I know exactly who and what the Anti-Mage is. A man consumed. But even in his dedication and pursuit, he never once presumed to have control over me. There's a reason he insists I call him mentor, not master. He knows why I sought him out. And he knows that my path isn't his. Like any father, he has dreams of what I can become. And like any daughter, I want to make him proud. But I need to do it on my terms.
As for Wei's past, it's left pretty vague, so all we really know is that Anti-Mage rescued her as a child, and she's grateful for all that he's done.
The Anti-Mage says I survived for days before he found me. He'd stumbled across the remains of my caravan, on the trail of the things that took my kin. He was younger, full of fire, looking for a fight, not a child. I don't remember much, but I do remember the first moment I saw him. He likes to tell me that all he did was lend a hand, that I would have survived without his help. Growing up, I even used to believe him, but I've seen what the world makes of lost children. Some call the Anti-Mage heartless. A monster. I know better. He found a place for me. And when I was old enough, a place beside him, to learn more than just how to survive. Together, we'll beat back the darkness that threatens to make lost children of us all.
And although Wei feels like she owes a lot to the Anti-Mage, she also has a playful personality that shines through every now and again.
The Anti-Mage and I are similar, but we do have differences. For instance, I know how to talk like a normal person. Those cookies smell real good. The Anti-Mage never baked me cookies. Oh man, remember when we killed that necromancer? Fun times.
On to specific hero relationships, Wei is a big fan of Axe and all of his heroic deeds, most likely because she enjoys Goodkind's writing.
Axe, I've read every adventure Goodkind's written about you. Even Red Mist, Red Passion, which is criminally underrated. I wonder if Goodkind will put me in one of her stories now.
And because she's such a reading connoisseur, I'll believe her when she says that Winter Wyvern's poetry isn't too good.
So, Orath, I've read some of your stuff. It's very, verbose. I hope you fight better than you write poems.
She's also a big fan of animals, or at the very least, mounts. So she might be the Dota universe's version of a horse girl.
Can I ride Sagan? Please? You're a horrible person, Luna, but Nova is adorable. You're gonna let me ride the bat when this is over, right? You know, this would be so much cooler if you'd let me ride you into battle.
To wrap it up, it looks like Anti-Mage forbids Wei from interacting with Wraith King and Invoker.
If my mentor finds out I'm helping Asterion, he's gonna kill me. Honestly though, I'm not supposed to talk to you.
Whatever you may think about Wei, she adds a whole lot to Dota's story, and her inclusion in the game is a solid one. And you know, sometimes it's more fun to go around burning mana as a sporty anime girl. There, I said it. Alright, back to the man of the hour. Anti-Mage at this point has had his skills pretty set in stone, but he does gain some fun tricks here and there. Starting with where we left off with the Dota All-Star changes, AM's first notable modification would occur in 6.75, where his legs were decreased. I should probably explain this one. Back in 2012 during TI2, a post-game analysis for a Tongfu vs EG game featured Bruno the Statsman. While the conversation at the analyst desk was insightful, Bruno chimed in with a galaxy-brained interpretation of the game.
But on this time, I think the problem with EG was a surplus of legs. Look at Tongfu's lineup: Naga, no legs; Venomancer, no legs; Morphling, no legs; Enigma, no legs. Lina has 2 legs, but she's flying, so she doesn't use it. That's the strat right there.
The no leg strat is so imba.
This became a short-lived meme that Valve even made a reference to during one of the TI6 community challenges called the New Leg Strat, which required the community to play and complete enough games until 100 million pairs of legs have walked the map. Anyway, this patch note was a nod to that moment, and decreasing the number of Anti-Mage's legs is actually quite a nice buff. 7.00 brought along 2 major additions to AM's arsenal. His talents were first introduced here, but, you know, they kinda suck, so whatever. But he also got a new Aghanim Scepter upgrade. This would allow Spell Shield to passively reflect a targeted spell once every 12 seconds, kind of like a mix between Linken's and Lotus Orb. This upgrade wasn't too bad at all, especially if you went against a team that had a lot of single target stuns. In 7.07, Anti-Mage's new talents gave him some fun tools to play with. At level 15, he could get an uncontrollable illusion after blinking, which does a lot to annoy the enemy. The extra blink distance at level 20 could keep you safe from all harm, and both the level 25 talents just made him better at his job, and you can choose to either go defensive or offensive with it. This patch also made Mana Break no longer a unique attack modifier, opening up his item build a whole lot more. Prior to this, you were pretty much stuck with Basher and Vladimir's offering if you wanted any additional effects, but with this change, Eye of Skadi and Satanic were viable options as well. In 7.20, Anti-Mage lost his Aghanim Scepter upgrade due to Spell Shield being replaced with Counterspell. So in 7.22, his newest Aghanim Scepter upgrade would alter Mana Void stun duration, and it places a debuff on enemy heroes affected by his ultimate. If an enemy dies with the debuff on, they'll get 70 seconds added to the current cooldown of their highest cooldown spell. A really unique upgrade to say the least. This really affects heroes who want to buy back, or someone like Bristleback who's all about spamming low cooldown spells. Finally, in 7.23, Mana Break now also burns a percentage of the target's max mana, letting AM scale into the late game better when heroes like Outworld Devourer have a billion intelligence. This makes the burn way more effective. Mana Void could also no longer be cast on spell immune units here, but its Aghanim's cooldown increase went from 70 seconds to 100 seconds, which, if used on the right target, could be game winning for late game teamfights. And with that, we're finally up to date with all of Anti-Mage, his various skill sets, the dozens of copycats, and even his protege. But you know what? I don't think we've ever seen him in his spare time. I wonder what he might like to do for fun.
のんきに俺の力分析してるみてえだけど、いいのかよそれで。出せよ挽回。俺がこの手でぶっ潰してやる。
挽回だと図に乗るな小僧。それほど強く望むのならば、私の挽回。挽回。千本桜影吉。
体が動かねえ。
波動のよ白羅。
何も変えられねえ。かつて俺はかつてち
バカな何者だ貴様。
何者だ。はっ名前なんかねえよ。
thank you for stopping by. I knew Anti-Mage's history was going to be a doozy to edit, but it's finally finished. While you're here, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch. Join my Patreon to support the channel, and I don't know, I'm tired and my voice is dead, but I'll see you soon.